Good morning, everyone. It's my pleasure to welcome you all to this Enghouse interactive webinar, Building a Collaborative Contact Center with Microsoft Teams. For those that don't know much about Enghouse are a leading global provider of customer interaction management solutions who have been helping customers globally for over 35 years, and we have been a Microsoft Gold partner for over 15 years. My name is Patricia Merchant. I form part of the Demand Gen team here at Enghouse Interactive, and I'll be your moderator for today. Before I introduce the speakers, I just want to run through a few administrative reminders. Today's session is being recorded. The recording from the session will be delivered to you via email in the next few days. All your lines have been muted, but please feel free to ask any of the speakers a question by using your questions panel, and we should pose those questions to the speakers at the end of the session. Okay, so let me start by introducing the speakers for today. We'll start off with Jeremy Payne. Jeremy Payne is the VP of Marketing and Alliances at Enghouse Interactive, who is responsible for the company's 4 key solutions across Europe, Middle East, and Africa. It's my pleasure to also welcome Tina Shepherd from Microsoft Teams, who's a specialist at Microsoft. And Tina comes with a wealth of experience and has a deep history of working in the computer software industry for over 25 years. And lastly, but not least, of course, is Brian Gahan, who's the head of information technology at Flogas Ireland. And he's responsible for the development of both Flogas IT, business strategy, digitization, acquisition, and entry into the new markets. So with that, let's get started, and I'll hand over to Jeremy. Over to you, Jeremy.
Well, thank you very much for that, Trish. And yeah, on behalf of Enghouse and everyone on the call today, I'd like to pass my thanks on to Tina from Microsoft and Brian from Flogas. So without any further ado, let's take a step back and understand, some of the key drivers that are out there today. And I think we're all finding ourselves right now in the middle of this great work from home experiment. And like most things in life, there's sort of equal and opposite force, positives and negatives. And I think many employees are finding that, there's lots of upside to working from home. A lot more productivity has been created in typically, almost an hour more productivity a day where people aren't sat in their cars, trains, commuting to work. And people have had more flexibility. But like many other things in life, there's always, an equal and opposite force. And I think there's a lot of tension, a lot of frustration out there at the moment. And many customer-facing staff, call center agencies, frontline workers are all experiencing, increased levels of abuse, candidly, down the phone. And that's a much harder thing to manage when it's in a virtual environment than it was in a physical environment. So with that said, as we move to the next slide, we'll start to think about, what does that mean from a technology perspective and a business operational perspective? And I think most organizations, this year had to be very, very tactical, more tactical than probably they've ever been in their history. And this year really was about kind of keeping the plane in the air. So we saw, a technical evolution that candidly was already underway. People were already, moving to the cloud. People are already introducing AI, automation, self and social service into their customer-facing operation. But their timeline or their plan got compressed by means that were out of their control. So it's probably fair to say for many organizations, 5 years of comfortable evolution had to be compressed into 5 months. And so for many organizations, the technological piece was there, the software existed, the systems existed, and getting them deployed whilst challenging is certainly not impossible. But we're now at that point really where, as we talked about in the first slide, culture is now having to catch up. How do you sort of create a culture that creates the right working environment, particularly for customer-facing staff? So I think we're at an evolutionary point where the role of customer-facing staff is evolving rapidly. A big survey came out today that talks about the fact that employers that are hiring are increasingly wanting to hire people on a temporary contract or a specific timeline contract or 0-hour contracts. So the shift towards the gig economy is very much in flight. And when you start to layer in, automation, AI, self and social service, what you're starting to see is that the easy stuff, the routine stuff, the easily to parameterize stuff is being dealt with in an automated or self-service way. And that means the stuff that's left is awkward, ugly, complex. And there's probably never been a point in history more than today where organizations need a virtual collaboration environment. And many of the companies that we work with, for them, the answer to that problem is Teams. So it's not by accident that Microsoft Teams is the fastest growing application in Microsoft's history. And collaboration right now is key to solving complex customer problems, but it's also key to keeping the cohesion of a team together. So with that said, I'm going to hand back to Trish, and she will now sort of introduce you to Tina, and Tina will talk a little bit about Microsoft's approach and thoughts around Teams and how that's going to evolve.
Okay.
Thank you, Jeremy. Okay, thank you, Tina. Over to you.
Yeah, so as Jeremy said, it's quite strange as day one of UK lockdown. Here we are again working at home. So please excuse my my kind of open planning kind of kitchen kind of dining area, but yeah, it's really exciting time still, but obviously we're delighted to show how Microsoft is in that unique position to enable your digital transformation. And of course, obviously, it's at the moment it's the first time that kind of all 5 generations are in the workplace, all with different backgrounds and expectations around collaboration tools. So chatting on phones, doing email, text, lots of people have different expectations there. So right. So let's just move that on again. There we are. So transforming the workplace. Some of these stats are still relevant. This slide was pulled together probably before COVID, but obviously still some of this information is still relevant to a lot of organisations that I speak to on a daily basis. Leaders are definitely looking for better collaboration and effective communications amongst their organisation, not only from an information worker that Microsoft is traditionally sold to, but also down to like frontline workers, contact center users. We're now seeing, this transformation, leaders are wanting to kind of transform their organization, because otherwise, if they don't, their competitors are taking market share. So definitely there is a real requirement from senior execs inside organizations to kind of do this digital transformation. And some of them have been doing that digital transformation that probably would have taken maybe a couple of years. Before I went on maternity leave, I came back in May, but obviously I was away for a whole year. Before that, people were talking about, this is going to take time. I've come back during lockdown from maternity leave, and the transformation that some of those customers that I was dealing with, some obviously don't exist anymore, but a lot of the customers have transformed, and it's quite exciting to see where I sold Teams before I left, and see those organisations really adopting Teams in an amazing way in such a short space of time. Is really, really amazing. So and of course we've got published case studies that talk about all of that. And of course, leaders agree that moving from kind of really siloed applications to a team-based working is really the way to success, and certainly Microsoft Teams helps with that. So as I move to the next slide. So the pressures of today's workplace, basically, IT companies, IT organizations are stretched really, really thin. Even now, I've had lots of customers this week really adapting very quickly to the lockdown. And of course, IT are really under pressure, trying to maintain those systems, but also trying to kind of react really, really quickly to the changes in circumstances. And meanwhile, organizations need to be agile. Again, this week it's really proven that organizations really need to kind of be agile, because obviously employees spend a good percentage of their time on routine tasks. And of course, individuals take about 23 minutes to regain productivity after an interruption. So we know from kind of reports and kind of Harvard business reviews and things like that, people do get distracted, and then they have to then kind of take some time to get back into being productive, and it's sort of averaging about 23 minutes. So again, those are kind of the pressures of the workplace. Okay. So Microsoft Teams. So what is Microsoft Teams? For those of you who don't know, Microsoft Teams is a hub for team working. So it kind of, if you think about it, it's like a single pane of glass, which brings together kind of all of what your teams need. So chat, threaded conversations, meetings, video conferencing. You can use it as a soft phone, PSTN calling, content and collaboration. So maybe you're working as a team on a document, maybe a tender response. So you're actually responding to a particular RFP. You're kind of got a document. You can share that amongst everybody who's involved in that document, and you can do co-authoring. So of course that becomes really productive. So you're not actually having to send a document to a person and waiting for them to access it, do their work, and then return it. This all can be done seamlessly, all online. Really easy. And of course, using Office 365 and all the applications that you expect from Microsoft, it's fully secured, and it's got the compliance and manageability that you kind of expect that Microsoft will provide to our customers. So what does that mean for your business? So Teams can help with that transformation of the workplace in collaboration. So bringing everything together in a shared workspace allows you to kind of chat and meet and create and make decisions really, as a team really quickly. Obviously, those kind of Teams is sort of structured to either teams or projects or kind of anything that you're kind of as a team is coming together. So again, you can kind of visually see, create ideas, share content, share kind of ideas all together very easily and be productive. It can also streamline business processes. So for example, if you've got kind of applications or repeatable processes, it's got the ability to kind of allow you to kind of add development into Microsoft Teams. So to give you an example, you can automate if you've got any like Q&As, you can have an automated bot that you can ask questions, and it will automatically give you that response based on obviously the database of answers. So again, a Q&A bot that can really easily take away some of those mundane kind of requests. So if you think about HR, IT, they can kind of transform and provide a lot of that kind of mundane tasks, usual questions that you get asked in those organizations from staff, actually automated into Microsoft Teams. And of course, you can also connect everyone on a single platform. So, when we talk about Teams, obviously you have your chat, your collaboration, but also you can integrate applications into it. So for example, if you've got any line of business, it's not necessarily a Microsoft application. If you've got any line of business applications or maybe a Trello kind of panel, you can actually integrate that into Microsoft Teams. So you actually stay focused, you stay within Microsoft Teams all the time, but you can continue with your workflow all of the time. Okay. And then, of course, you know, we provide that enterprise grade security and compliance, because obviously with Office 365, it has that already framework in place, and Teams just sits underneath that. So it's really, really agile. And of course, obviously, as Jeremy mentioned, Teams has been the fastest growing application in Microsoft history. I mean, I've been in Microsoft a long time. This has been an amazing kind of transformation for a lot of organizations in the last 5 months. And, you know, what we've seen in how many people are making video calls, instant messaging, how many minutes, you know, just in the last 6 months has been amazing. And the stats really speak for itself, really. Okay. So let's just move on. Didn't press all the buttons going forward. There we go. So Microsoft Teams is, as I say, it's a hub for in the workplace. If you guys if you're not using Microsoft Teams, I would definitely recommend going and checking it out. There's lots of material out there, training, YouTube videos. If you kind of want to do a little bit of what does it do? How can it help me? You can also you can enable free version of Teams for yourself, or if you've got a 365 account, you can enable Microsoft Teams and maybe play around with it. But yeah, you can kind of do those capabilities really quickly. It's gone back too far. There we go. And today, so in today's workplace, you know, disruption is happening. We all know that. Jeremy spoke about that already. You know, our rise in customer expectations is really, really high now. And of course, this digital world is now the new world. And also, organizations need to differentiate themselves, you know, from their competitors, etc. And of course, the workplace and the way people are working is changing, and becoming agile and innovative is, you know, and delivering that speed of service to your customers really is really important. And of course, what's also important is attracting and retaining the right talent. You know, organizations I talk to, they really are wanting to ensure that they are retaining the right talent and attracting you know, people into their organization. So they need to provide these latest technologies to help them. And then also, you know, providing that friction-free collaboration and communication to drive creativity is really, really powerful. And I sort of talked about some of the case studies, but one of the case studies that we will share with you is around Microsoft is actually oh, I forgot the name of the organization, sorry. Is Accenture.
Accenture.
They have actually done a huge amount of transformation with Microsoft Teams. And in fact, they've actually, in their case study, they publish a lot of the stats regarding how many minutes, how many video minutes, video conferencing they're doing on a monthly basis. They are a large organization anyway, but obviously just mind-blowing some of the stats that they're actually publishing in how they're using Microsoft Teams. So yeah, really, really, really amazing. Sure, that's going to move on. Sorry, Patricia, you may have to move that slide on for me. Okay, so Microsoft can help with the solution and concept that can empower Microsoft employees, you know, expanding your enterprise in ways that you've never thought possible by integrating the technology, by creating an ecosystem, and also the workplace, that the way that people are working is definitely changing, and you know, we can certainly help. We can, you know, we've been in Microsoft, we've been talking about the modern workplace vision for a number of years. You know, we come out and say, you know, we really want to help organizations, and actually Microsoft, you know, has changed. Our culture in Microsoft has changed. It's been quite interesting seeing the culture in Microsoft over the number of years, how much Microsoft has changed our culture. We're very passionate about helping our customers, and hopefully organizations can see that coming through, you know, with the way that our products are evolving. But also, not only that, things like, you know, our products are now covering things like diversity and inclusion, so to try and you know, open up the workforce so that it's more inclusive in using our technology. So, for example, if you're colorblind, or if you're you have a hidden disability, these are the things that Microsoft is kind of building into our products across Office 365 and Windows 10 to bring everybody in and allow people to have that, you know, modern workplace. And certainly empower every single employee on, you know, on the planet to achieve more. So hopefully, if you've got any questions, I'm happy to take some questions at the end, but I'll hand it over back to Patricia and to introduce Brian.
We're going to just do a very quick poll question.
Okay.
Before we hand over to you. So I'm just going to kick that off right now. Just 1 second while I launch this. And if everybody just likes to let us know what they think of this. So just one question for today. What would be your top barrier for implementing Teams in your contact center? So would that, you know, be that you have some budget constraints? Would it be the contact center compatibility, timescales, internal expertise, so you don't have the internal expertise to do that migration, or you just simply, we're not going to migrate over to Microsoft Teams currently or in the future? So I'll give you just a few minutes to answer that, and then what we'll do is we just hand over back to Jeremy and Tina. Maybe they can give us a little bit of thought of what the responses are. So there's quite a few people that are still voting. So what would be your top barrier for implementing Teams in your contact center if you are thinking of implementing? Budget constraints, contact center compatibility, timescales, internal expertise, or we are not going to migrate to Microsoft Teams. So we got 50% of the people have voted so far. Okay. Okay, let's close this. I think that's most of you. Thank you very much. So let me close this and then just share. Hopefully you can see that.
Yeah, quite a few on contact center compatibility.
Okay, Jeremy, or Tina, you know, what would you think of what we got right now? There's results.
Yeah, it's not expected. You know, budget constraints, definitely. You know, times are very challenging right now. Definitely, we've got a lot of customers, yeah, in similar situations. In fact, we've got lots of programs that our Microsoft channel, our partners are actually can run things like free workshops, and actually to try and help with unlocking or understanding what those budget constraints could be, and maybe help with that business case around, you know, if the, you know, how much it would take not to move versus actually, if you do move, these are the things that could potentially help with that piece. So it could be that there are kind of areas where, for example, if most people are not aware, Microsoft has announced free audio conferencing available to our customers right now. For those who have not using audio conferencing today, what I'm doing is using that opportunity to help customers move budget around, maybe look at moving away from someone like BT Meet Me or an audio conferencing supplier, and actually looking at that cost and whether or not they could reshift that to help with projects moving forward. So yeah, it's a great opportunity to kind of look at AR partners, but also look at some of the other pieces that we're offering to help organizations, prioritize, help them with those type of things. From a contact center compatibility, Microsoft has now released APIs allowing contact center vendors to actually write their contact centers into Microsoft Teams. So again, those, it is, great to see that. And of course, obviously, Enghouse is one of those partners of ours who have kind of built a contact center into Teams. So it's not surprising, to be honest, that is coming out high, because obviously we didn't really, about a year ago, we were talking about contact centers in Microsoft Teams, but we didn't really have the APIs. We knew the APIs were coming, but obviously it's good to see now those capabilities are now released, and our partner channel is taking advantage of that. So other things like internal expertise, that kind of makes sense if you think about our IT organizations have got huge pressure. So again, our partner channels and also Enghouse partner channel really can help your organization with that type of thing. And of course, Microsoft has provided free workshops. Definitely take advantage of our Microsoft partners out there, because they do have the expertise and the capability to help you guys with that transformation. So
that's great.
I don't know if Jeremy's got anything else to add.
Yeah, Jeremy, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, I mean, I think as Tina touched on it, I mean, we've been fortunate as a company really over the last 15 years to be invited into Microsoft's R&D labs in the States and work closely with Microsoft on the APIs. And I think as Tina said, if we were asking this question probably 18 months ago, certainly, beyond that, if we were being completely candid and honest, the APIs weren't strong enough and robust enough to give the degree of functionality that most contact centers would need and expect. As Tina there alluded to, things have moved forward enormously in the last 12 months. The API is an awful lot richer, and the functionality that can be afforded, between the contact center and Teams has grown enormously. And I think, on the fourth point with the 23% internal expertise, one of the motivations that we see, for many of the organizations we work with to move to the cloud is that they're kind of looking to reduce their own internal IT footprint slightly. So, we're fortunate again that we have, some very sophisticated, highly skilled partners, not just on contact center, but also on Microsoft Teams. And they offer a whole range of things around managed service and hybrid working models and all the rest of it, and subscription and pay as you go and every which way you want to slice and dice it. So I can understand why some people may feel that could be a consideration. The only, if I was to offer one small tip on that bullet point 4, is when we see people plumb Teams in, it's a little bit like building a house. And if you don't put the right foundation in, your house is not going to be particularly good. So it's pretty important to make sure your underlying infrastructure is good before you start. If you get that piece of the puzzle right, the rest of it just kind of flows fairly smoothly. So I'll hand it back to you.
Yeah, I just want to add on to that. I just want to add in on the internal expertise. Microsoft has really put an awful lot of focus on helping customers adopt the technology and use it, licensing as much as they can, to the point where we've built a whole new practice called Fast Track. And Microsoft Fast Track is there to help. It's a free service. It's part of the, if customers are buying licenses from Microsoft, it is part that you can take advantage of. Fast Track is free internal resources to help get you onto our licensing, utilize the licensing as quickly as possible. But yes, Jeremy's right. Getting that foundation, maybe from a networking perspective, definitely is, once that is done, moving forward, you'll have a much better experience. But yeah, definitely there are resources that Microsoft are actually now applying that you can lean on and actually help help with that.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Tina. And yes, just on the contact center capability, we're now going to hear from Brian from Flogas, who has actually built a very efficient customer service operation on a Microsoft Teams contact center. So let me hide this, and I'll hand over to you, Brian.
Okay, thanks, Trish, and good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us today. Yeah, I just want to give a little bit of our story in Flogas and an overview of our journey to Microsoft Teams and to Enghouse Interactive Contact Center, which we had to do in, I guess, a little bit of a hurry in March, April of this year during the pandemic. So it was quite a few unique challenges around that. So just a little bit of context initially about, people may know who Flogas is, but I suppose Flogas has a couple of different business units, and its traditional business unit is kind of gas and cylinders, bottled gas and bulk gas, or what we know as LPG. And that's, everybody knows what cylinders of gas is. Bulk gas is maybe for, heating for hospitals, schools, all those distilleries, that type of, large businesses that are maybe not on the gas grid but would have a big demand for gas. So very much an essential service provider in its LPG business, and operating in both the Republic and Northern Ireland. And then, we're also in the energy business as well. So we're supplier of natural gas on the grid and electricity as well, both in the Republic and in Northern Ireland, trading as Flogas natural gas in the Republic and Northern Ireland, and trading as Flogas electricity in the Republic, and recently acquired Budget Energy in Northern Ireland, which is our trading brand up there. So I guess, what I'm painting a picture here is just a traditional business, right? You might not have as many digital natives in this type of company as you might have in your Googles, Amazons, etc. So, but also you wouldn't have all of your staff being in a contact center, or a large percentage of them. Probably over 55% of our staff, I think, are non-customer facing. So when we're looking at telephony and contact center, we need to kind of consider the entire population. I had joined, sorry, Trisha, could you move on to the next slide? I don't seem to have control. Thanks. So, a little bit of a context. So I guess when I joined Flogas in 2018, I've been from a technology background, working in multinationals. We've seen quite a bit of risk around our IT environment. We had been undergoing an overall digital transformation, and we had looked at, telephony in terms of rolling it over and upgrading it in last year, but it was on the list, but it was probably a little bit down the list in terms of prioritization, because we were focusing on other areas. But it was a mission critical system, and as I say, it served those brands in different jurisdictions, and we had a lot of 8 or 9 different sites across the country. We had a very legacy design consisting of multiple suppliers and components, from a PBX, call recording, call center software, voicemail systems, all very different providers. And people talk about cost as a reason or for going to it. So I suppose a lot of people kind of tend to focus on the call cost and the savings around that. But I mean, for me as head of IT, the cost I was facing wasn't really that. It was the cost of all this legacy, and having to maintain and support it, and the cost of training people and having people kind of constantly responding to tickets and configuring old phones and old software and trying to recall old call recordings. So it was a human cost, and then there was a business cost as well, because I suppose the support agents and the contact center agents were kind of slowed down a little bit by this extra complexity. So, it wasn't just the cost of the bill you pay, it was the cost of the organization and the people cost, and then those staff not being available for me to do other projects. So it was definitely kind of slowing us down. And we not only didn't have remote working capability, we really didn't have any high availability or disaster recovery. And from my perspective, from a risk perspective, I didn't sleep very well at night, knowing that everything was kind of dependent on this site. Everything routed through our main HQ, and if this was down, then nothing worked. So that was a source of anxiety for sure. Last year we had implemented Office 365, or sorry, late 2018 we'd implemented Office 365, and there was, to be fair, Office 365 was great, but Microsoft Teams was, we provided training to the entire staff on all aspects of Outlook and Excel and SharePoint. But when it came to Microsoft Teams, it kind of just it sold itself. People trained themselves on it. Within 5 minutes, people were up and running and loving it. It was one of those things that people immediately just adopted to and loved. And we even knew before we rolled it out, my team who had demoed it, you kind of saw it and we're like, oh, we got to get this, because it was just really helped, again, in a traditional business. It helped people communicate, not just from desk to desk, but from site to site, and people between sales teams on the road and all that. So Microsoft Teams had been a biggest success of my time in Flogas, and had been really well adopted. So that was a key factor as well. When we were looking at telephony, we had done some due diligence, but we hadn't really implemented telephony yet. So then COVID hit in March, and all of a sudden we were like, okay, these staff can't work remotely. And after a week or so of trying to get people laptops and stabilize the organization, we really said, let's do this. Let's try and get our on-prem telephony into a remote solution so people can work remotely for the contact center staff. And we had to do this during the COVID lockdown. So a lot of challenges. Like, I haven't been in the office myself for any of this or during this, or none of my team were. So we were trying to build this in a remote situation, and this is the journey we embarked on. I guess one of the main considerations obviously was time to market. I mean, we needed to get this done ASAP, and we needed to get it out there, and we needed staff to be able to get out of the office and get safe, and we need to be able to respond to our customers. So there was a couple of things we looked at about well, maybe there's one or two kind of solutions that would be clunky but would allow people to work remotely. But we had also been looking at the longer term and the bigger picture and addressing risk, and we kind of felt that it'll take a couple of weeks no matter what we do, and if we go with another solution, we'll have to go and revisit this again, and we'll still carry all this risk. So we said we'd go all out and go and do this solution. And I suppose the catchphrase was, never waste a good crisis. There might have been fear, or there might have been resistance, or there might have been, people didn't have time to get trained. But if we're going to train somebody and we're going to spend all this money, let's do it properly. So we had looked at those things, and we kind of made this was one of the factors around this decision. What we were looking for was, obviously, for our contact center staff, we needed a contact center with call recording, but for the non-contact center staff, they needed, systems. They already had Microsoft Teams for meetings and telecoms, etc. But they also needed a telephony solution. So we kind of wanted this kind of unified solution. We didn't want the contact center staff on one platform. We had looked at some tier 1 solutions for contact center staff, which is kind of delivered as a full SaaS model. But then it meant that people who were kind of part-time contact center, or who wanted to communicate between contact center and non-contact center, would have to use 2 platforms. So they'd be using maybe Teams or something else for telephony, and then another platform for the contact center. So and so we kind of wanted to bring these 3 together, and the real kind of solution there was, well, if we put Microsoft Teams as our core infrastructure, and then for the contact center staff, we just layer the Enghouse contact center on top of Microsoft Teams, it meant that people became very familiar with Teams. The contact center just had this extra screen they logged into before they took calls, but it was all running on Teams, and it made internal calling and communication and collaboration seamless. It made training seamless, and it made the rollout seamless, and it meant people weren't on 2 different platforms, and we didn't have, again, different volumes of suppliers and complexity to manage. I also talked about, the success of Teams was easily adopted in the past. Again, we had only rolled it out for chat, really. People didn't really have headsets at that point, but it had been big success. And obviously we had these other metrics, like, we wanted to address our risk, and we needed to provide the capabilities that any contact center needed, like hunt groups and reporting and the call recording functionality and etc. So ultimately, like, we looked at those solutions, and having met Enghouse and having worked with Microsoft and been in the labs, we settled on Enghouse based on the cost and capability and their commitment that they would deliver this within a period of 4 to 6 weeks. Okay, so if you go to the next slide, please. So I guess we initially initiated there. We agreed that the plan was with Enghouse around the 23rd of March. Actually, within a week, we had the system live, running in parallel with our old system on a few numbers that we had allocated. So within a few days, we were really up and running and able to test it and get business testing it and IT testing it. It took us another couple of weeks, 3 weeks maybe, before we actually went fully live. And I suppose during that period, it was really a period of adoption and training and ironing out some minor glitches. We had some challenges around our own infrastructure, around our bandwidth and things like that. And we, as I mentioned, we were undergoing digital transformation of a lot of our systems. So we had been upgrading our fiber optic links, and we had been improving solutions, improving our infrastructure. So but I have to say, very early, that literally over the weekend, the system was built and configured and ready for our guys to test. And we spent the next couple of weeks kind of training people and preparing them for the rollover. I suppose that the big challenges was, this delivery happened, from this office at home, which was very unusual because, everybody was at home. There was nobody in the office, and we weren't used to that. We were kind of used to, well, when somebody went home at 5 o'clock on a Friday, didn't see them till Monday, but stuff just happened differently. We were all working remotely. We had to deal with that. We had exceptional time constraints. We had some challenges around hardware, although we were a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of laptops and headsets, and we did have some stocked up. But we had to be able to get those out to staff. And training and management of change it can never be underestimated, whether you're a traditional company or a more modern company. But people had to become familiar, and we couldn't walk up to their desk and show them how. We couldn't have a kind of a show and tell conference or bring them all into a room like we would traditionally and say, here's a headset, here's how you turn it on, here's how you connect it to your PC. It all had to be done on the wire, and that was the challenge. How do you reach out to a group of maybe 300 or 400 people and get them, make them aware this is happening, keep them up to speed? And they had to learn a lot of different technologies. Obviously the hardware, the headsets, but also, they weren't familiar with our remote access, VPN, connecting to our network remotely. They hadn't used Teams telephony. They had only used Teams chat. So they had to get to use Teams telephony and then the touchpoint contact center, and just small questions about voicemails, about how do you make internal calls. Some of it's very intuitive, but it all had to be explained to them. That was the big thing, was trying to reach these people, reassure them that we were looking after them and we were going to get them a solution that was going to help improve them and help them get safe. And I have to say, people really got on board with it and really got behind it. And again, the crisis was a real driver there for people. They knew this was the reason for it happening, and they were all very supportive and did the testing and fed back very diligently all of the challenges that they found. If you could just go to the next slide, please. Trish, I'll just kind of talk a little bit. The architecture, relatively straightforward, but I guess we had two groups of people on the right, on the client side. We had the contact center agent and the standard non-contact center employee in Flogas. So both were kind of connecting to Microsoft Teams for their telephony, and running on the same Teams optimized session border controller. And then we had the Enghouse environment that was just running as an additional layer for the contact center. So after the contact center agents logged into Teams, they logged into EICC on top of that, and that gave them their metrics, their call recording, all their other stuff. So relatively straightforward, and obviously we had to implement high availability and redundancy around all that. But initially we started off with a single thread, and our redundancy was our old system if it didn't work. So we got up and running pretty quick in that way. Just to go to the next slide, really, I suppose just a couple of maybe some of the key maybe takeaways or success factors around this, that we got this up and running in a matter of 3 or 4 weeks. And we could have gone live in 3 or 4 days. Because we had the old system, it was working. We had the new system working. We really want to get it right. We really want to make sure that people were okay, that people were trained. But the pilot in Teams telephony, we had implemented Teams already. That was successful. We had rolled out Teams telephony to the IT team. That just gave us some confidence. It gave us some gotchas. It gave us some knowledge that, you know, what headsets are good, what aren't good. It's worth spending money on ABC. We had this real-time environment, right? This was the big thing about an IT project team working through COVID. We were all in our offices, but we had a Teams channel set up between ourselves and not just Enghouse, but with Microsoft and with our telco provider and our infrastructure partner. We were all on this Teams channel talking real-time live chat. We ran into challenges when something got into a difficulty on a Friday morning, somebody would move it forward within a few minutes. If it happened on Friday night, somebody might move it forward on Saturday morning, and then someone else on Saturday evening. You come back on Monday and the project looks entirely different than it did on Friday night. So, you know, enormous progress from an IT perspective, enormous engagement, a huge energy around it all. Because it was a crisis, people were kind of running to the fire and trying to help get this up. So that was our big thing. We were all seeing what was going on. We could all see, if we stepped away from our computer, if we went for a break, we could see what the various people in the team had been chatting about or had been dealing with, and everybody could talk real time about what the real situation was when they were talking to a partner. Other things, you know, we needed strong business engagement, and we had a separate thread around that. So we had a whole group of management who were responsible for training and management of change in the business team and getting them ready and all of that type of thing. You know, I suppose it is fair to say that there was a significant spike in support tickets during testing and within 48 hours of go live, and that's something you have to be prepared for. And I think when you're dealing with a telephony project, it's the small little details that get people, and particularly if they're if it's their first time, like, you know, so something like, you know, somebody's Wi-Fi is down at home, or they might be connected to the internet, but they're not connected to the Flogas network, so they don't have that, or they don't have the software configured, or they don't have a license, or they don't know what their number is, or just the battery's gone on their headset. You know, small things can just take a bit of time when you have a large number of people coming on very quickly. You know, and you might fix a problem for them, and the same problem happens 2 or 3 times before they get used to it. So, you know, I think we logged the number of tickets, and we had hundreds of tickets, it's fair to say, during the period. I think we categorized about 97% of them. We're really just what you might call a user training or user knowledge or user awareness. So we got a business analyst very focused, and he developed a whole suite of documentation around it. He put links on our IT support page. We had a couple of videos, you know, how to use your new headset, how to get up and running on Teams, how to get up and running on call recording, how to search for a call recording. So we had documentation, we had videos. We sent emails to the staff, say, you know, go here, look at these videos. If you've got a problem, then call us. And that worked really well. So it was just about the little bit of the detail. I think that's the real kind of takeaway we had. We had a good intern support. We had 3 or 4 interns in from a few different colleges, and they really kind of mopped up all of the details, and they were really knowledgeable. So it's just those things, like, you know, you might have 2 people who are job sharing using the same numbers that mightn't have been, you know, documented. You might have had your, you know, small things like, you know, the lifts or the security systems were using the old phone system and it wasn't documented, and you just needed to kind of have ability to kind of deal with those details. The overall platform worked extremely well. It was just connecting people up to it and giving them a laptop, making sure the USB port were working, all those types of details. But the old system can be gotchas. There can be gotchas there if you're not aware of it. But I suppose the biggest learning for me was, you know, this burning platform or this COVID situation, it was a catalyst for change. It opened doors with everybody. It opened doors for me and for my team. We had great, I have to say, it was very challenging, but we had great fun doing it. We had great interaction with Enghouse. But we also felt that when we went to other companies like telco providers or Microsoft, we said we need a solution in 4 hours. It happened when we needed. response from the business, we made a change. See if your call recording's working now. They did that immediately. So everything happened really quickly. Everybody was very focused. This was the number one thing, and just a kind of a shared focus of minds was really the key success of all of that. Okay, I think that's probably my last slide. This was, I guess, just some of the main benefits of the contact center from Microsoft perspective. But it delivered our contact center, our call recording. It gave us a lot more searchability by customer, by caller ID, by time, etc. And we were now able to do self-service access. So you could grant managers access to their team's recordings and staff access to their own recordings, which we didn't have in the past. And we were able to easily configure the flow of calls and monitor the volume of calls. But now the big win was the majority of staff have this working from home capability, and to be honest, they liked it. They adopted it. It was this, getting rid of these old systems. I'm a high tech. We've got these great new high tech systems. Flogas is looking after us. Flogas is keeping us safe. And I'm working for a company that has good technology, and they were proud of it. They were talking about it, and that was something that worked very well in terms of adoption. We reduced our suppliers. We got rid of a lot of our old support agreements. We reduced our run costs, and now we're safe. We can work outside of a site. We've got high availability. We have disaster recovery, and from an overall perspective, the teams I had running around fixing the telephony system that nobody wanted to fix are now kind of working on other projects and are happy to help configure new users on the new system. So that, I guess, is an overall summary of our journey. And sorry, I might have gone a little bit over there, Trish, but just wanted to give a flavour of some of the nuts and bolts of how it was and how it played out. So hopefully that helped.
No, that was great. Thank you very much, Brian, and very interesting. Jeremy, did you want to say a few words?
Yeah, I mean, thank you so much for that, Brian. It was a really insightful presentation, and I think as we started at the top of this session, sort of talking about 5 years compressed into 5 months, I think in your case it was more like sort of a few years compressed into 5 weeks or even 5 days. So a really rapid timeline, and I think some really interesting takeaways as well. When you put your architectural slide up, actually the simplicity really, I know it's a PowerPoint slide, but actually the simplicity of effectively a Teams optimized session board controller, passing everything into the Enghouse contact center and onto the agent or attendant. So this stuff has got a lot simpler to deploy. And I guess in terms of some top tips or life hacks, if you like, the idea of 97% of the support tickets were sort of user enablement and training related, and that kind of idea of social service or social media, so learning from one support ticket, putting an FAQ or a video, a YouTube video, whatever, so that your own staff can learn from a challenge that another staff member has had, is key. And I guess underlying that, Brian alluded to the fact he'd got a really pretty reasonable infrastructure in place before he started doing this, which is I think one of the reasons they were able to deploy and go live and have benefit out of the Teams and Enghouse environments so quickly. So with that said, as we move on to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about some of the Enghouse offers that we have available. So all of the Enghouse sort of products and solutions are optimized for Microsoft and optimized and integrated for Microsoft Teams. So there's nothing that any of our customers are likely to want to do that we couldn't do within a Microsoft environment. And we also, for all the people on this call today, we have free trials and free demos and everything available for this. So if you want to try out any of these applications yourself or learn a bit more, just contact us at the end. And as we move on to the next slide, we'll start to think about some of the resources. So there's a huge amount of resources on the Microsoft website, as you would expect. And we also have on the Enghouse website a whole section of the site dedicated to Microsoft and Microsoft Teams. So there's case studies from a variety of customers, including Brian and Flogas. We've got some guides that help you step you through, I guess, a pre-flight check of some of the things you might want to think about or get in place before you start to move your customer service operation to Teams. There's videos, YouTube, all the rest of it, blogs and vlogs. So there's a wealth of information. And again, Enghouse and Microsoft are here to help. And I think one of the things that's we're very fortunate with Enghouse is we have some just really, really nice customers, people like Brian, that are very generous with their time and are happy to share and help. And we have customers across most verticals, government, local government, housing, retail, hospitality, leisure, pretty much anything you could have mentioned. We've got a customer there of small, medium, large size. So yeah, as I said, if you're interested in taking a free trial or a demo, email Trish on that link, and we'll put you in touch with our right people. So with that said, that starts to conclude things. Trish, were there any questions that have come through on the chat for the panel?
There is, yes, I have quite a few. Let's start off with one for you, Tina. It says, hello, I'm the product manager of a platform for schools, and we are going to be integrating with Teams soon. Are you able to describe how Teams can be used and received in school, please?
Oh yeah, definitely. Because my girls, I've got twin girls, age 7, and then they go to primary school. And during lockdown, before I went back to work, we were actually all the online learning got pushed onto Teams. So actually, Teams can be there's templates available when you set up Teams that you can actually enable for education and other pieces. So yes, definitely go in as an administrator, check it out. There's also sections for Microsoft Teams on education. So what I can do is I can share that through Patricia and get those references out. So definitely, it is slightly different to an enterprise, because obviously you've got things like check in, check out, those type of things. The school requirement is slightly different, but yes, Teams is brilliant because I used it, and in fact I had to help a lot of the parents with their training. So we were doing an awful lot of texting and everywhere. I think I was becoming the expert inside our school.
My son has actually now started using Microsoft Teams. He came home last week with that. So yeah, so very good. Okay, Brian, a question for you. Let's see. Sorry, 1 second. We've got quite a few questions coming in. Most just disappeared. Question for Brian. Was the solution integrating with a CRM system as well?
Initially, no. We have a legacy, because we're a utility business, we have a legacy ERP system, and we are using Dynamics CRM, but only in pilot mode. So the solution we have a design that it will integrate with our future customer care and billing system, and will pull up the customer name on the solution. But the initial implementation we have didn't require that, because that system is not live yet, so we're a little bit too early for that.
Okay, we've got a minute left, so we've got a couple of more questions, and again, just continuation for you, Brian. Are you using Microsoft? Sorry, no. Did this solution cover all the sites users in Ireland?
Yeah, it covered all sites in Ireland and the Republic of Ireland, and really it doesn't matter where they are, because we're no longer dependent. We are our telco provider and our session border controller are all running in Microsoft Azure and Microsoft Cloud. So if our premise went up or was unavailable tomorrow, touch wood, nothing would be impacted. So it really is location agnostic, I suppose, is the best way to say it. Yeah, it's available anywhere. I can take calls when people dial my Dublin number, no matter where I am in the world, if I was allowed to travel at the moment. But yeah. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. One for you, Tina. Are there any playful apps or extensions that you can recommend that can improve employee or team's engagement in Microsoft Teams?
Yeah,
Quite a nice
there's a
question.
couple. Actually, Microsoft is now releasing a really easy, low code, no code kind of solution, which allows you to kind of look at in Power Apps. You can actually get templates that are already pre set up. I know because I've recently gone through a little bit of training internally, and I kind of set something up in my demo tenant, which basically, if, for example, voicemails are go into a shared mailbox, you can actually enable a little notification that lands in a channel, Teams channel, to let you know that that voicemail has left. So the user doesn't have to keep going back into Outlook. It's so cool. I wrote that in 10 seconds. I was quite pleased with myself because I don't normally do coding, but yeah, the template was there. I just followed the next, and it kind of it worked. So yeah, there's some really simple things. I guess the key thing is work out what you're trying to do, have a plan, and then kind of, you know, have a little look at it. If it's something that's very simple to enable, like a Q&A bot, you can do that as well, virtual attendant. But yeah,
actually, I have one there that might be worth considering. Microsoft Planner actually has an integration to Teams, and we just use that for some of our projects where you don't have a full kind of Microsoft project suite, but it just is a task list. So you could essentially plan a number of tasks over a week. If you're a mini PM, you will need 5 people to do this. You just list the tasks, you allocate them to people, and it comes in through their channel. It ends up in their calendar, it ends up in their chat, it ends up being prompted when a task gets done. So that's worth. It's a free one to plug in, and it's easy to trial, and like a very simple list works quite well. So try that one, Microsoft Planner.
Thank you, Brian. We have been inundated with quite a few messages, but I'm conscious it's kind of 2 minutes past 11 o'clock. So what we'll do is we'll make sure we reach out to those guys that we've not been able to answer your questions after this, so we'll make sure we reach out. And just to answer some of the questions regarding the recording, we will be sharing this in the next couple of days, or next week now, because it's Friday tomorrow. So with that, that concludes our webinar. I'd like to thank Jeremy, Brian, Tina, for your time. Thank you for presenting, and obviously thank you very much to everybody that registered and attended today. So thank you, and have a good day.
Thanks, everyone. Talk soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.